everyone, I'm Courtney Hansen, the Deputy Director at People for Community Recovery, and I'm so excited to welcome you all today to the second annual Hazel Johnson EJ Celebration. We're so thrilled this year to be featuring Dr. Beverly Wright in conversation with Cheryl Johnson. And before we get started, we just wanted to take a moment to thank our sponsors whose generous support not only makes this event happen, but keeps our work going. So much love and gratitude for our EJ champions at the Natural Resources Defense Council, our EJ heroes at the Union of Concerned Scientists, our EJ defenders at the Chicago Frontline Funding Initiative, and our EJ friends, Dr. Erica Holloman Hill with IECA Solutions and the Field Museum. So as we begin, we really just wanted to take a moment to ground ourselves in why PCR convenes these yearly EJ celebrations and highlight what we hope you might take away from the event today. So to start, we really believe that to know where you're going, you have to understand where you've been. And so that's why we created this space to remember the origins of the EJ movement and to honor the work of Hazel Johnson, our founder. We hope that this is a space that will provide inspiration as well as strategy for the future of the movement. So again, we're so glad you're here. When Hazel Johnson began her work in the late 1970s organizing in Elk Gardens, terms like environmental racism and environmental justice were not commonplace like they are today. Hazel fought for justice not only in her community, but also worked to raise awareness nationally about environmental racism. At the same time, we saw community EJ struggles erupting all over the country in places like Warren County, North Carolina, and the region of Louisiana, now called Cancer Alley, where Hazel was actually born. And these fights were mainly led by Black women who, like their civil rights organizers that preceded them, often went unrecognized compared to their male peers. And so we're here today to change that, both through these events and also through our work. And we know, today there's not really a shortage of research reports or academic literature or even first-hand accounts outlining the ways in which Black communities, and especially women and poor folks, are disproportionately harmed by environmental pollution and climate change. But as awareness has spread, that doesn't mean that our struggle has diminished. It's really just changed shape. The federal government and big name philanthropists have publicly committed to environmental justice and are investing really heavily in the concept. But many EJ programs still fail to incorporate environmental justice values. And funding to frontline campaigns often trickles down through multiple agencies or organizations before it actually reaches community groups who are leading the work and winning the change, oftentimes with the fewest resources and the least recognition. So now more than ever, we know we must be really discerning about who we consider EJ leaders and find opportunities to lift up their voices. And so part of this means recognizing that environmental justice is an intersectional movement. It's a place to build power and fight all of the injustice that manifests from oppressive systems and structures rooted in racism, capitalism, and patriarchy. From struggles for environmental cleanup to workers' rights and climate resilience to safe and healthy housing for all, and even reproductive justice and disability rights and so much more, EJ really means linking arms and fighting together for justice. So we hope today's conversation provides all of you with an opportunity to hear from two really amazing EJ leaders, to learn more about Hazel Johnson and her legacy, and to find ways that you can contribute meaningfully to the EJ movement. And so we're going to get started right now with a video tribute to Hazel Johnson.
Hazel Johnson was born on January 25, 1935 in New Orleans, Louisiana. She met her husband, John Johnson, in her late teens, and the newlyweds moved to Chicago in 1955. It's there she got involved with grassroots activism. She and John moved their family to Allgale Gardens in 1962, but their wonderful life took a turn in 1969 when John was diagnosed with lung cancer and died weeks later at the age of 41. Hazel later heard from neighbors about others experiencing cancer and lung issues like asthma, and of mothers in the neighborhood with high rates of miscarriages or delivering babies with birth defects. She discovered her community had the region's highest cancer rate and began investigating environmental conditions surrounding the neighborhood. Armed with the knowledge of the health issue related to the environment and determined to act, she shifted focus to address environmental hazards surrounding her community, which she coined the Toxic Donut. In 1982, People for Community Recovery officially incorporated as a not-for-profit organization and waged the environmental justice war on multiple fronts. In 1991, Hazel spoke powerfully about her community's struggle with environmental racism at the first National People of Color Leadership Summit in Washington, D.C. It's there she helped work to create the 17 Principles of Environmental Justice, a guidepost still used today. She emerged as a national leader and was christened the mother of environmental justice movement. In 1994, Hazel was invited to the White House to witness the signing of Executive Order 12898, federal action to address environmental justice in minority populations and low-income populations. Later, President Clinton honored PCR as one of the country's top 100 environmental groups. On January 12, 2011, Hazel died as a result of congestive heart failure. In 2015, the Illinois General Assembly designated 130th Street Hazel Johnson EJ Way to commemorate the legacy of the mother of environmental justice. Hazel's work continues today through People for Community Recovery, and her legacy lives on in the community-led environmental justice struggles across the country.
Wonderful. And big shout out to Cheryl Johnson and our communications consultant, Adam DeRose, who put that video together. I see lots of gratitude for that in the chat, and we're so grateful that you enjoyed it. But without further ado, I know you all are waiting for the good stuff. So it's my honor today to introduce our speakers, starting with Cheryl Johnson. Cheryl serves as the Executive Director of People for Community Recovery. She's the daughter of the late Hazel Johnson, who founded PCR and is known as the mother of the environmental justice movement. Cheryl learned the fundamentals of community organizing from her mom and carries on the work of PCR's mission to enhance the quality of life for residents affected by environmental pollution. Cheryl is a lifelong resident of Allgale Gardens Community Public Housing Facility, and she's a well-known and highly trusted community leader. Cheryl has played an integral role in the functioning and success of PCR's programs and administration since 1987, and in 2001, she assumed the role of executive director. Under her leadership, PCR has continued to work for environmental justice and economic equity, expanding outreach across the Midwest region. Since then, PCR has stopped discriminatory recruiting practices from the Ford Motor Company, prevented hundreds of units in Allgale Gardens from being torn down, pressured the Chicago Housing Authority to create a redevelopment plan that included community input, secured safe environmental cleanup on the south side, stopped another landfill from being placed in the community, and developed a solar job training curriculum and program in partnership with the Chicago Housing Authority designed for public housing residents. Cheryl's deep community connection and long-term vision for a thriving South Side and commitment to carrying on her late mother's legacy is really what fuels her work. Cheryl serves on the EPA's National EJ Advisory Council and the Illinois EJ Commission. And today we are thrilled to host her in conversation with our keynote speaker, Dr. Beverly Wright. Dr. Wright is an environmental justice scholar and advocate, an author, a civic leader, and professor of sociology. She's also the founder and executive director of the Deep South Center for Environmental Justice. The center addresses environmental and health inequities along the Louisiana-Mississippi River Chemical Corridor and the Gulf Coast region. The center is a community university partnership organization providing education, health and safety training, and job placement for residents in environmental justice and climate impacted communities within the United States. Dr. Wright has conducted groundbreaking and significant research in the area of environmental justice and developed a curriculum for the elementary level that has been used by the New Orleans public schools. She manages hazardous waste worker training programs that embrace a work-based curriculum and a holistic approach to learning for young men and women living near Superfund and brownfield sites, resulting in their employment. Dr. Wright has received numerous awards, including the Distinguished Alumni Award from the State University of New York, Robert Wood Johnson Community Health Leadership Award, EPA Environmental Justice Achievement Award, the Rainbow Push Coalition Community Award, the Ford Motor Company's Freedom Sisters Award, and the prestigious Heinz Award. She's also the recipient of the Beta Kappa Chi Humanitarian Assistant Award, bestowed by the National Institute of Science, as well as the Konrad Ahrensberg Award, given by the Society for the Anthropology of Work. Additionally, she was recognized in Grios as one of the 100 history makers in the making. She also received the Urban Affairs Association's Sage Activist Scholar Award and is the author of numerous scholarly books and articles, including Race, Place, and the Environment After Hurricane Katrina from Westview Press, and The Wrong Complexion for Protection, How the Government Response Endangers African American Communities from New York University. We are so thrilled to host her as our keynote today in conversation with our fearless leader, Cheryl Johnson. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Cheryl and Dr. Wright.
I want you to talk about your perspective when it comes to this EJ movement, from your experience from the beginning to where we are now. And, even looking at how is this the gender of us being involved with this and the race, the class, where we are today and what you see from where we started from and where we are. What's your opinion about this whole EJ movement that we involved with?
Well, first of all, thank you, Cheryl, for that. And yes, I loved your mother very much. And we're both from New Orleans, and New Orleans is known for its culture. Mm-hmm. And, our values and the way we embrace people or hold them accountable is also culture. It comes from our community, it's the way we interact. And Hazel definitely represented us. Mm-hmm. She had New Orleans all over her. I didn't initially know that she was from New Orleans, but I would hear things in her speech that reminded me of home and different things. I said, "Oh, Hazel, you sound like you could be from where I'm from." She said, "I am from New Orleans." And I was just thrilled. I was like, so that explains everything, if you know what I mean.
Right.
So, but to get back to the environmental justice movement, I got into this fight accidentally. A lot of people think that, I chose this. I didn't. And so I always see it as something, a spiritual calling almost into this, because I didn't choose it. I was working at Wake Forest University with Maya Angelou with a great salary, doing just fine, when I got the pull to go back, stay home when I went home for sabbatical. And so I got pulled into this movement, first pushed by Bullard because he wanted me to help him work on something. He needed some help, but then pulled by my own environment that I had never noticed living in Cancer Alley and just growing up there, driving with my parents and sibling from New Orleans to Baton Rouge, where I had other family members, and just seeing all of those lights and the awful smells. And, you know, as kids, we always looked at it as something terrible. We turn our nose up and say, oh, you did it, you know. And my daddy would say, smells like progress. So at no time did I ever think that these poisons were actually killing us, and not just us, but the earth itself, and driving climate change. None of that was connected. And as time went on, moving back home from Buffalo, New York, where I got my PhD and working there, I started recognizing things, seeing things in a different way from what I had ever seen them. And then was called to a civil rights hearing by community members living up and down the Mississippi River Chemical Corridor to testify. And they called me because we had just started investigating toxic waste and pollution by race. We began to recognize that the same way Black people lived across the railroad tracks, they also lived next door to or surrounded by chemical plants. So that same drive that comes out of slavery, this Jim Crow, segregation, discrimination, and systemic racism has driven this whole notion of pollution being okay if it's not near white people, especially white people with money. And so it's a long story, but all of those things started coming together, just almost crashing in a way that it made me angry and made me decide I need to get involved in this work. And Bullard asked me to partner with him on a number of projects, and so the race began. But what I need to tell you is that one of my first introductions to environmental justice through the arts was through your mother, and a play that a young producer from the city of New Orleans produced and directed. And I attended it in Chicago. I don't know why I was there, but they had this large, I call it paper mache, puppet,
I call it a
thing of your mom.
It was actually a 20-foot puppet.
It was huge, a
It's 20
huge
feet.
puppet with a big donut around it. And they marched in with that. And, that was my introduction to your mother early in the movement, where we were just starting, and she had already been dealing with this almost 10 years when my center started in 1992. But this was before, this was about 1987, I think, when I saw this production. And that was my introduction to your mom. I wanted to interject that. And because I lived in the South, I always looked at it as a Black thing. You can't live down South without everything being about white folks hurting Black people or trying to deny them access to stuff. The fight goes on and on. But as we got involved, we began to see, well, there's Cancer Alley in Louisiana. There's a port, the channel in Houston, that's Mexican. Anywhere there is what we called a despised minority, even going up to places like Minnesota, where Native Americans are being assaulted. Wherever the quote despised minority of the region is, that's where you found all of the toxic pollution or all of the disamenities to a good quality of life. You found that existed. And so for me, the vision of this struggle just began to grow. And that realization that while we are different minorities, we had a number of things in common, and it was discrimination and pollution. We all started to come together and form the environmental justice movement, which was a multi-race, multi-ethnic, multicultural movement that began to shake things up. We've seen over these almost 30 years since the first the National People of Color Summit we've seen a lot of progress and then we've seen pushback. Progress and then pushback. Where we find ourselves at this point in time is at a period of possible and maybe probable in some areas progress. What's driving this? Because systemic racism is so deep and the powers that be have so much political power and money that we often only move the bar an inch and then they push us back 2 inches. This is the way we've been going for 30 years with the changes in administration, the ball being bounced forward and then back, forward and then back. What has changed is climate change. Climate change, to an extent, affects all of us. Not in the same way, you know, because for rich people, it destroys their vacation spots and their play areas, you know, and their vacations are disrupted. For poor people, it destroys their home and their lives and displaces them, and they can't seem to get back. But the truth of the matter is we've all been affected. And more people are becoming educated in a way that environmental justice community people always knew that the fossil fuel industry would be the death of us. In every way that it has helped us, it is harming us. And so it's balancing out where the progress we've made because of it is all being washed away because of the devastation that comes because of our use and misuse of that particular product. And recognizing that Earth is becoming a hostile environment for human beings. Billions and billions of dollars of destruction each year. You know, the economy disrupted, commerce disrupted, people can't go to work. You know, you can't make money because you can't get out. And then what also followed, which was predicted by the scientists, was pandemics, viruses and diseases that would stop us in our track. Everything the scientists predicted over about 30 years ago is happening just as they said, but at a faster pace than what they expected right now. What's pushing EJ to the forefront is climate change. And the fact that they realize that they need all of us in the space to solve it. They can't solve it without us, and we won't let them make a move unless we are at the table. So I don't care what bill you're trying to push. I don't care what it is. We'll be outside throwing rocks at it to make sure it doesn't go through unless you allow us in so that we can move forward without being the canary in the mine, where for the greater good, we always suffer. And I'd say our biggest challenge today is being a part of reimagining how this world, as it relates to energy and electricity, should look. And how do we get to a point where we reduce greenhouse gases that we can start the cooling of the planet rather than the heating up of the planet that can save us all? You know, every time I watch people going to the moon, I think about that movie Oblivion. Isn't that rich people really believe they can create a world mid-space and leave us down here, you know? I mean, it's science fiction, but boy, it starts to look like, yeah, anything you can think of, anything you can conceive, you can produce. It gets very scary, but that's where I see we are. We either all hold hands together and get through this, or none of us are going to make it. It won't just be Black and brown communities being destroyed and not making it. Will, the ramifications will be for all of us.
You know, Beverly, you really brought up something. Every time I be in your presence, you always bring back a good memory, a good thought, you know, just as you said earlier, that this wasn't your career direction. You was thrown into this. And that's the same thing my mother said, but most importantly, it was really said that it's more of a spiritual thing. Her spirit, she said, I don't know, this may be my calling. And that's the exact words you said in this presentation. Absolutely. And that's the same thing I used to always hear my mom say, maybe this was just my calling. I don't know how I got into this, right. You know, but this, you know, so it's interesting to see that. And then when I've been thinking about it last night, and when I came, you know, and started traveling with her, that was like in the 90s, you know, I seen women in power. I see women standing up to corporations and industries in their neighborhood. The Darnell Wilkins, um, Peggy, Margie,
Margie
this,
Richards,
yes,
Imelda
yes.
West.
But what's most important that I always remember is the last speech, the first and the only speech that I ever heard was from Dana Austin.
It's the first one.
That was the most powerful, informative, pissed off, ready, telling it like it is. And I always remember that she said we should always stay united and don't go after government money.
Right.
That government money would divide you.
Right.
And somehow in this state of time, I've seen that happen because we all have to compete to the little bitty pot of money that they ever threw in for us to better learn about our communities, better help our communities than what they ever been before. But now, as we come into the terms of looking at what the Biden administration is doing, for an example now, and just hearing about, environmental justice going to be incorporated in every federal agency. And, what do that really look like, feel like today for you in this whole movement? Is it being exploited? Or is this the for real deal? Because all this wouldn't be happening if it wasn't for the climatic problems that we are experiencing in this country. Now, 30 years ago, my mother used to say, if we don't get our act together, we're going to see a change in the weather pattern. And we see a change in the weather pattern. She didn't call it climate change. Right. She called it a change in the weather pattern. And that's what we are experiencing today. So I just want you to just touch, I just seen powerful women, really stand up and really fought for their neighborhood. How important why is that? Why is it women? Why is it the women? Is it because, I just want you to answer that because because we caretakers, that's what I was going to say though.
Oh yeah. Well, they say behind every good man is a woman. That's that's right. That's so true. But the other side of that is that men seem to get all the awards and the accolades for the work that women are doing. Like nobody eats if the woman isn't in the kitchen. It's that kind of thing. They have healthy children because of what women do. So women are the closest to the community. They're the closest to, if it's gardening at the house because of cooking, we're the closest to the heart of any problem that exists in our community. And because we're closest to it, we see it better and feel it and become enraged and we work. But we still work that's changing now, but we tended to work inside of our gender roles. Gender roles are changing. And what you saw happening in the environmental justice movement was a change in gender roles, where women were no longer just working in the background, they were speaking up. And we even had this Fannie Lou Hamer. Think about the civil rights movement. You had a lot more women, powerful women than Fannie Lou Hamer, but most of them worked in the background, and we're finding that out now. But they always knew the pulse of the community. So, we are, I think Dr. Robert Bullitt, one of my best friends in the world, is considered the father of the environmental justice movement. But Hazel Johnson is the person that brought this whole movement together for her. Her words may not have been as big as Dr. Bullitt's words, but they were just as powerful and moving in a way that his words could not. So women feel the pain of their children, of their community in ways that men don't. And it does have to do with us being women. Or let me say this, maybe in ways that men don't express. Let me change that. It is about gender roles that teach us how to express pain, how to express sorrow, and they are different. So
Mhm.
women are different from men in that they express their pain in different ways and they respond in different ways than what men do. We are always ready to get to work. It's not
Mhm.
about a discussion. It's about
Right.
what do we do to make it better. And I think that's the biggest difference between movements now that are run by women as opposed in the past that were run by men. The way we do our work is different.
Yeah, and I really think too is it under the notion that when you threaten my family and the health of my kids, I'm coming out fighting.
Oh, yeah.
And that's more of a mother instinct,
Yeah.
and I guess that y'all played that major role because I really look at you as my big sister in environmental justice movement,
Mhm.
but you also that auntie of this
Mhm.
movement. You know, uh
I
you
just don't
groomed
want to be the
so
grandmother of the
yeah,
movement.
you prepare so many students to take up this fight, and I appreciate that so much, because it's about their future. It's about our present and our future generation. And if we don't get this stuff together, it's only, I always say, I learned through this movement that there's only two choices you're gonna make. Either we're gonna live in a clean environment or we're gonna live in a polluted environment. There's no in between.
Die
If
in
you
the
try to
polluted.
get in between, that's when all that messy stuff come in. All the confusion get caught up, and I don't want to get caught up in it. So I always try to make my choices either it's a two-way choice, either it's right or it's wrong. And that's what my mother has instilled to me, because she said, you may not know the true answer to anything, but your body would tell you. It'll feel good if it's right in the heart. But if it ain't right, you get that stomach, that grunt in your stomach, then it ain't right. So I try to use those things that she's instilled into me to continue her work and doing this type of work.
Cheryl, I
So,
didn't
when
answer
you look-
one of your questions. I wanted to tell you, asked another part of the question in the beginning, and I didn't answer, and I'd like to.
Okay,
Because
sure.
you asked me about the new administration and all of the things that are being put in place under this administration, and whether or not it was different, that I think it would make a difference. So, especially in what Biden calls this all of government approach to solving problems. And I just want to say that the Biden administration has the interagency committee and WEJAC. The old administration with us had the NEJAC and the interagency working group. Yes. The difference is that what's coming out of those interagency working committees is completely different from what came out of the interagency working groups. The working groups, in my opinion, in the past, just listened to complaints and like threw up their hands to some extent. You had some agencies trying to make changes and most of them did not. But with the interagency working committees, there are mandates that have been put in place for them to follow. So the WEJAC that I'm on reports directly to the president through the Center for Environmental Quality, CEQ. So now we have a direct line to the president, whereas NEJAC reported to EPA. So there are some differences. And what we have now is climate change, George Floyd, Black Lives Matter. All of these things matter, winning 2 Senate seats in Georgia, showing political power. All of these things are pushing the government to do more and to do things differently. We also have science that is vastly improved from what it was when your mother was talking about chemicals and really not being able to show how some specific chemicals were affecting the body. The science was not there for a lot of it, and they used it against us. All of that has changed. The process for getting us where we need to go, though, is still difficult because of systemic racism. So you have a new program, and it's really good. But if you put it in if you have this wonderful new soft drink, it's really good. You put it in a dirty bottle, what you're going to get out is some of the same. And in fact, it may overpower your new taste. That's what we're dealing with. We're fighting systemic racism within systems that, although all the ideas are wonderful, trying to find ways to make certain that old patterns don't still control the outcome. And we end up with the same thing where we started. And I'll give you an example. The HUD project. Years ago, I didn't find out till I was in college that one of the reasons that white people disappeared from the city of New Orleans and we got black mayors and everything was because of HUD. HUD started the home buyers program, where I think it was President Johnson wanted to make certain that more Americans were able to buy their own homes. Well, maybe in Chicago it worked like that, but down south, the people who controlled those programs were all white and most of them racist. And so black people knew nothing about that program, but white people did, to the point that over 50% of white people moved from the city of New Orleans, running from segregation to the suburbs. And when we found out about the money, it was all gone. Here comes those consent decrees that never have enough money in it because it's the money that's left to do anything. So think about that, how that happened, and look at all of these wonderful ideas. It still has to be put in that bottle. So our job in the WEJAC is to make certain that we anticipate, uncover all of the factors that could cause this to go awry. And the people who are supposed to benefit from these programs don't benefit from it. The administration is still learning. This is all new and it's hard, but we are very busy working up developing screening tools and scorecards for the government. All of that. I mean, I work so hard for this administration and don't make a dime. It's the hardest work I've ever done, but no money at all, if you know what I mean. But that's what's going on. Theoretically, everything is on paper and they are engaging large numbers of EJ people, communities, and trying to figure out how to make it work. And that's what I'll say about moving forward. This is our best shot at getting some of what we want done. Our best shot at the moment.
Oh, okay. But because one of the things that I learned through this process that yes, when it comes to the housing, it's always been a systemic problem in Chicago. I think Chicago has the worst housing practices anywhere in the country, in my opinion, because it's always been discriminatory here. You know, even when Martin Luther King marched here, he said he's been all over the country, but he never experienced what he experienced while he was marching in Chicago, just for us to have housing rights. So even when it came to either ownership, Black folks really didn't own the property. They just, it's a term that they use, but they owned the land only. They didn't own the property. That's the way that it went. So people thinking they paying for their home, they actually wasn't paying for the home itself. They was paying for the land that the home was on. I'm forgetting that terminology because we're talking about it. And I'm glad that you really touched on it. So what do you think would be some of the best strategies, or how would you say that how can we inspire the younger folks to take this mantle, because it's so important, because this is a quality of life issue that we're dealing with. You know, it's either you're going to have a healthy life or you're just going to have a messed up life. And how can we, you know, because our communities are still left behind when it comes to this movement, you know, to putting a call to action together, for an example, because there's so many other stresses
and distractions
that happens to us. But you know, when my mother got started in community work, there was some stresses that she had to deal with. but I think it was just her dedication. So can you say, do we need to learn what dedication means, or reinstitute it, or reimagine what dedication looked like to be part of this movement?
So that's a complicated question to answer because we have different levels of poverty, different levels of education among our children, different levels of opportunity. So it gets to be a complicated response, and it doesn't apply to everyone. So when we do the HBCU Climate Change Conference every year where students from HBCUs, and it's coming up again, come and present their research on environmental justice, the communities they're working with, the faculty members who are also working with them. It's a wonderful project so that young people get to work with communities where they come from and learn how to put certain projects in place for the community sustainability as it relates to climate change or EJ issues. But through that process, I've learned by also traveling to international conferences like the COP conference, that, last year was in Glasgow, Scotland, but before that, every time I would go, I would see Asian youth, Latino youth, Native youth. And I would see a few Black kids, but they weren't Black, if you know what I mean. They were green, but they weren't Black. So nobody was lifting up the issues for Black people, although we were suffering the most on the ground. And when it was lifted up, it was lifted up by somebody other than us. And I went back and talked with Dr. Bullock, the two of us, and I said, we're going to start this conference. And out of this conference, we will start engaging our young people to speak for us, even on the international stage. And that first year, we brought a total of 90 people to the COP 21. And I think we had 52 students on that group, young men and women from HBCUs, all of whom came from communities like yours and mine, where we grew up. These were not rich kids. And a lot of people who don't know HBCUs don't understand that the majority of the kids there are first generation college. The first kids to leave their homes and go off to get a college degree. Through that process, we have learned that you have to train young people. They have to be exposed so that they can become engaged. And when you train them, they become engaged. They become strong advocates. We don't have enough of that going on in our communities. I remember when churches were very active in communities, working with kids in the summer and everything, trying to instill values and also bringing up causes, even if it was just picking up paper in your neighborhood, that's gone. So we have to find a way to reconnect with our children. I mean, all of our children at the college level, most of whom are coming from neighborhoods just like the ones we grew up in, poor neighborhoods, and dealing with the kids on the ground who have nothing to do. And organized crime is taking advantage of our kids right now, as you know. All of this carjacking and grab and snatch, all of that's controlled by organized crime. And because our kids have nothing, they're easily pulled into it. So we have to recognize the way that we've been attacked. And if you can keep our children uneducated, you can keep the rest of us apathetic because we don't see any real change, you won. This is what we're fighting, making certain that our community is well educated and our children are better engaged. It's going to require all of us. It's going to require the church coming back. It's going to require local parks owned by the city for children that used to have, softball teams and swim teams and all of this stuff where kids were engaged. Right now, this is all they do. For the most part. And you don't get good information off of here all the time. Most of the time you get trash, but that's what they're getting. So it's a huge job for us. We have to work with our local government, with our state government, with our federal government, take a holistic look at what's happening in our communities, and then take all of those agencies, from recreation and parks to housing to the environment, all of these things, the Department of Transportation, all of them need to be involved in helping us solve this problem. So it is an all of government approach, but it's an all of community approach as well that's going to help us. We need everybody at work.
And see, and that's what I make my analogy about this. It's like an umbrella. That's environmental justice. And the spokes that make this umbrella is the housing issue, it's the economic issue, it's the transportation, it's the food system, you know. And if any one of these spokes are broken, then we don't have an operable umbrella.
Right.
And that's what we are experiencing in this country. And I'm just, you know, my goal is I still live in public housing. I'm not ashamed that I still live in public housing. I'm not even ashamed to say in March, I've been living in the same community for 60 years. So I've been through the changes of this community, and I've seen how it was at its better days and it has been at its worst days. But this is the worst that I ever seen, because of the same things that you just, the same injustices that you just mentioned. And that's about holistic of what our environment is about today, you know. And how can how can we motivate someone to, and that's what make our work so challenging, because we try to intersect energy, you know, like you hear a whole lot about solar energy, solar panels to save. And I'm arguing with us on the state level, well, in my community, if you target my community, you got to look at some of the infrastructure problems. If I have a bad roof, I can't get solar panels. How am I, and if I'm struggling to pay my utility costs, put food on my table, where would I think about having solar panel on my roof? So those are these are some of the things that, you know, when you look at some of these environmental policies that come down, and when it comes to the implementation of it, it has to be real. It has to be really real to hit the people who you are targeting. And sometimes over the years, it never was designed to hit my neighborhood. It was able to camouflage that it's for my neighborhood, but in actuality, it never happened. So I say this, do you think today, when we're talking about environmental justice, is it just, for lack of a better word, a fluff? If it's just, you know, or is it real, and are we really connecting to it like we should, you know? So I guess I'm really just that, you know, because it takes so many various components to make our environment healthy. But if it's so broken up, is it repairable or impairable? You know what I mean? So what is your thoughts around that?
So I think that the attempt is to apply an approach that's holistic. And I'll give you an example. There's so many things happening to us, but a lot of us live on top of Superfund sites and next to polluted facilities. You know, we're living on top of former landfills that are now Superfund sites. So how do you approach that? So an all of government approach is one that we're talking about specifically for a community in New Orleans called Garden Plaza. It was called Agriculture Street Landfill. It was the first project that the Deep South Center worked on. We worked to have these people removed from a Superfund site for 30 years, over 30 years. And they had a 34% breast cancer rate, breast cancer alone. Well, some of the highest cancer rates in the state, literally in the country. We still couldn't get it to be called a cancer cluster because you know, ATSER has never really ever found a cancer cluster, because that means a whole lot of things when you do that. But what we're doing now is, in order to finally solve the problem, it requires a number of agencies working together. City government
Mhm.
to help relocate the community, EPA to now better clean up the property and bring it to a level that can be put to use to industrial standards. Department of Energy to then develop a solar panel field that would help reduce the cost of electricity for the city, which is directly related to our taxes. And then a training program for our young people in the area that would teach them how to install solar panels and give them jobs in putting that together. That's a holistic approach to one problem in one city. If that same approach is used in all of the areas, problems that Department of Transportation has, it may require that they have to work with other agencies to solve the whole problem. So then the whole problem is being resolved and you're tapping on jobs and training for kids at the same time, reducing greenhouse gases, right? Because the city now pulls electricity from the grid. And from there, you can move on to other things like community solar. That would bring down the bills for a whole community, or solar on top of a church that can be applied to memberships to reduce their bills. I mean, they're as complex as this situation is, there are a million remedies that could be in place. And in the end, we'll all be better off. But it takes taking that initiative, identifying a community and attacking its problem, all putting it in a better place when you're finished. That's the approach that this government right now is trying to take with this whole of government approach. You have agencies talking to other agencies about solving a particular problem. There's so many rules and regulations within government that stops one agency from doing one thing, but another agency can. So getting them talking is probably the best thing that could happen. And getting them all on the same page where they say, we want to say yes to a community that's hurting. We don't want to keep saying, no, we can't do it. Put your heads together, become innovative and figure it out. Because our enemies, the people who don't want to see any change, find every loophole that they can, and then they invent some and do whatever they want and just wait for the suit. You know, so they've done it now. They know they're going to be sued, but they just do it. You know, so I'm like, we have to be as ferocious as what they are in our attempt to using government to protect our communities.
Yeah, I think that that is so absolutely correct what you just said. And one of the things that I learned that our government doesn't talk to each other because of those same rules and regulations that they have. And I think once they cross over those barriers and really start working together, they'll find the commonality that they should have been working together from the beginning. But I don't think our government was ever designed like this. So I know it's frustrating. And but the change got to happen. So in closing, what advice would you give young generation who are fighting EJ issues or other social issues in their community? What word of hope or strategy that you think we can pass on to this future generation?
Well, the first thing that I would say is that you need to educate yourself. Get in places where you can learn. You know, and everybody, kids now today, when they can't consume it in 10 minutes, they're done with it. So they take the 2-sentence approach with no background, and that's how you end up in trouble. So training, you know, I think that college kids, older kids, organizations should always begin training your community. We're having now in Louisiana where EPA is going to start using fence line monitoring, something we've been asking for forever, and have people wear body monitors. And they're asking the community, help us, tell us where you want the monitors. Well, we can't tell you where they go. We're not educated in that way. So first come in with a training team. to talk about monitors and what monitors do and what it should be doing. Once we know that, we can tell you, oh yeah, that one over there is in the wrong place if that's what a monitor is supposed to do. Because as you know, the chemical companies always put monitors up and have them facing in the opposite direction. We don't know.
Right.
Instead of it facing the pollution, it's turned backwards. And a lot of people don't know that the monitors in Louisiana completely missed the BP oil spill event. You know why? Because they only come on so many days a month. So the days that the monitor was off, that's when BP happened. So the monitors is showing, oh, everything's just hunky-dory down here, you know, nothing in the air, when in fact, the air was saturated with PM 2.5, which of course is what caused our people to die so quickly from COVID. Because COVID-19 was actually attaching itself to these tiny, tiny particles, and we're breathing them deep into our lungs. Our death rate was through the roof here in Louisiana, especially in St. John Parish, which had the largest number of deaths initially. Before we had shots and really understood it, we found out the connection between fossil fuels and pandemics for that matter.
Oh, wow.
And I'm getting a note, right? Yeah, I have to get on a White House meeting in just a few minutes. That's why the WEJAC, we meet like twice a week for hours, and we have public meetings tomorrow. So my secretary is telling me I gotta move in just a minute.
Okay. All right. Well, before you leave, I know we got some people in the audience, and we may have some questions that we could turn on the mic for those who want to pose a question to you. But I just want to say I thank you for having this opportunity to have this conversation, and people could see, you know, how important this environmental justice movement is from your perspective, for being involved with it for so many years. It took us 30 years to get where we at this point. So, and it's just and just a word of encouragement, you know. So if we could open up, do we have any questions, Courtney?
We have one question in the chat and a couple of comments. So
it has to be quick, you all. I'm so sorry, but I'm
Okay.
presenting at the WEJAC meeting.
Oh,
It starts at 4. That's the problem.
well,
Okay.
yeah, we should let you go then, but thank you so much,
Yeah.
Dr. Wright.
I'm so sorry I don't have time to answer questions, but I have to get on this WEJAC call to try to make happen what we've been talking about. We want to make happen.
Yeah.
So I apologize, but I have to go because I'm the
And we
second
thank you.
presenter.
We thank you
Thank
for your
you.
hour of time. Okay.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Go in there fighting. Go in there fight, my sister. I know.
Going in there to fight. That's
Yeah.
right. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So
Oh my God.
the question in the chat, I think, would be a good one for Cheryl to answer anyway. And then if folks have other questions for Cheryl, we can address a couple. Otherwise, we will transition to the call to action and our closing. But I did want to name this question that is now drowning in the chat here. From Marcus, he asks, how can we implement a solar community that benefits the community? Also create funding for community residents to repair their roofs. What are the pros and cons of solar panels?
First of all, it all depends where you are located at. Solar panel is coming to be a hot commodity as we speak today. If you in Illinois, we passed a law that's called the Climatic Equity Job Act, which gives the opportunity for solar to be installed in low-income community and EJ community. And the opportunity and everything is free for people. And it's not just looking at it from just a receivership of putting panels on someone's house, but it's also looking at opportunity for being trained to become installators or salesmen, whatever you choose to be as far as that energy sector. It also gives you an opportunity, if you're a general contractor, construction contractor. There's opportunity for 2 programs that you can get involved with. You could get in the incubator program, but if you have more experience than the incubator program, because the incubator program actually gets you started as a contractor with being licensed, being a legal entity in the state of Illinois. But the accelerator program here will help you become a solar installer company, in which there are resources from the state level, and it's a huge significant amount that you can get from the state of Illinois to be in this accelerated program. And also it's required for established solar company to mentor your company. So it's just great opportunities there. There's when it comes to our community, we have to still fight for our community to get solar, especially if they have infrastructure problems, if they have problems with their roof, or if they have electrical problems that need to be fixed in their house in order, or even if they probably, as simple as they probably need a tree to be cut down because they don't get enough sunlight because they got trees on their property or surrounding their property. So it varies considering what the issue is. Fortunately, we have a client that had the opportunity who had a bad roof, and we was able to find resources for her to be able to get her roof fixed so that she can get solar installation on our roof. So with the training opportunity, it is coming down the pipeline. I think that the training may be up and running, and they've been looking for students to be in recruit. They probably start recruiting probably like in April. Classes may be between April and June. What was the other part of the question, Courtney?
The pros and cons of solar panels, but I think you kind of addressed.
Yeah, well, the pros and cons is basically either you can get it or you can't get. And the reason why you can't get it because you got a lot of infrastructure problems within your property that prohibits you from getting it. Also, income may be prohibited for some folks, but the state of Illinois made the income level very high. You know, I think for a person who one person, I think is almost like $40,000, $42,000 that make you eligible to get free solar on your home.
I did put some links in the chat too, so if folks are interested in learning more, you can check out our website, and there's a form if you're interested in solar you can fill out, and one of our organizers will follow up with you to talk about Solar for All or other programs that can help you. And then we also have a lot of resources in our help center for things like roof repair that Cheryl mentioned, energy efficiency programs, and a lot of other great resources. So that's in the chat as well. Check it out if you're interested. I don't see any other questions in the chat, so we can kick it to the next portion, which is our call to action. We want to make sure that nobody leaves here without ideas about how they can get involved. So I will turn it over to Jordan, who is running our slide deck. She is a climate fellow with PCR, and my colleague Adela, who is PCR's health equity organizer. So take it away, y'all.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Courtney stated I am the Health Equity Zone leader for People for Community Recovery. And we just want to thank you all for joining us today for this really powerful conversation about the EJ movement. We hope it left you inspired, and we want to encourage you to take action to support PCR's work and EJ's work where you are, here are some immediate steps that you can take. First, you can support the legislation honoring Mrs. Hazel Johnson and highlighting the importance of environmental justice. Please ask your congressional representative to co-sponsor the Hazel Johnson Congressional Gold Medal Act. And stay tuned for the email action alerts on the legislations coming in February. You also can get involved by checking out our new beautiful website for more information about volunteering opportunities, upcoming events, and also how to follow us on social media. Our website is www.pcrshy.org. Please also visit the Deep South Center for Environmental Justice online at dscej.org to learn more about their work and a wonderful event they have coming up this spring, the 8th Annual HBCU Climate Change Conference, happening April 13th to the 17th. Again, to learn more information about this, please visit the website, dscej.org. And last but not least, if you're interested in donating to our wonderful organization, your financial support will help us sustain our work and keep our organization flexible enough to address urgent community needs. Through campaigns, mutual aids, for example, last year we mobilized quickly to successfully save our historical C building in Argyle Gardens from being demolished. The wonderful work of Cheryl Johnson made this happen. We can't do this work without supporters like you. Donation links are in the chat. Next slide, please. Again, we want to thank you all for attending and for your commitment to environmental justice. As we wrap up, we'd like to invite you to participate in a new tradition. It's called a waterfall. We encourage you to share in the chat one word that you're feeling now after hearing from our wonderful speakers, Dr. Beverly Wright and Cheryl Johnson. Together we can create a waterfall, and we hope you feel encouraged as you transition to the rest of your day. Thank you all. You guys be safe.
Seeing lots of inspired, grateful, captivated, excited, moved, committed, hopeful. Thank you all so much for being here and for sharing that. And we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. We will follow up with you about action items, as well as with a recording of this webinar. And look forward to working with you all and building a stronger EJ movement.
Thank you guys, and happy birthday, Mama Hazel Johnson. Today is
Happy
our actual
birthday.
birthday. Yeah, today is our
Happy
actual
birthday.
birthday. Okay, bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.